Good morning and welcome to the New Orleans Imperative, the radio show that focuses on public education in New Orleans. This is Raynard Sanders and I'm your host. I'm here every Monday morning at 10 a.m. and we talk about the unpopular truths in this publicly, privately funded school district. For those of you all that are listening to us for the first time, we'd like to welcome you. And if you're transitioning to a computer, you can listen to us online at www.wbok1230am.com. That's wbok1230am.com. As you well know, for the last few weeks, we've been talking a little bit about the way that the reformers and these corporate reformers have masked success. And we have had different guests on. And this morning we have Dr. Mercedes Schneider. Mercedes Schneider. And good morning, Mercedes.
Good morning, right.
And I want to thank you for taking time for your schedule to come on the program. And this is your first time on our program. And but you have been doing some very good work as it relates to basically, I think, speaking for children's rights here in Louisiana.
Yes,
as it
sir.
relates to the reforms and stuff. So we're just kind of, to get our listening audience a little bit familiar with yourself, just kind of, tell us a little bit about who you are so our listening audience will know who they're listening to, and then we can begin our conversation.
Okay. I am a public school teacher. Of late, I need to qualify that I'm a traditional public school teacher. I used to be able to just say public school, and that meant traditional, but it no longer does. I teach in St. Tammany Parish. I am from St. Bernard Parish, and I have taught full-time 18 years, and if I include my part-time years in there, about 20 years, all the way from 7th grade to graduate school at the university level. So there's a little bit about me.
Yeah, and you're a trained statistician?
I am. That's another little bit about me. Yes, I have a PhD in statistics and research as well.
Yeah. And when I first heard about you, I heard a couple of years ago that this teacher from St. Tammany Parish was questioning test scores and questioning the data that the Louisiana Department of Education was putting out. And that's what we're here to talk about this morning, because there is a lot of confusion and different stories coming out about data. Most of the research that I've worked with, which is basically on your side, the fence, we don't see any improvement. Most of the external analysis of the test scores and the data for the last 7 years, as we have looked at it, we see kids retrogressing. We don't see anything, really creative or innovative happening like was supposed to happen with charter schools and in the legislation. So could you tell us a little bit from your analysis how they mask and their failures and say that they're so successful? What is exactly that they do and that they feed to the media?
There's a lot that I could say on that.
Well, let's go.
Let's go. All right. Well, what got me into this to begin with, I had no intention of doing all of the writing and the research that I ended up doing on what's going on with corporate reform. Now, when I use the term corporate reform, corporate as in corporations and businesses and the privatization of education, because that is the goal. That is their goal, and by their, I mean John White and all the folks he's hauling in. That's the goal. One of the things that these folks will do is they will hide data. They will hide raw data, which is the very basic numbers from the public, and John White and the Louisiana Department of Education has done a very good job of that. They have taken old data sets off of the internet, and they have presented information in current data sets that is not useful information. For example, percentages of students scoring certain ways or belonging to certain categories. I can't do very much with a percentage. I really need raw numbers. So having said that, I can do some things with what is presented. And so when the school performance scores came out in October of 2012, I started to look at them because I initially wanted to do some analyses on those scores, but I just started noticing funny things that would catch my attention. And in corresponding with Lottie Beebe, who is a wonderful advocate on Bessie, we came to realize that the data that she was offered as a Bessie member and the data that I was offered as a community member, they were not exactly the same. And so there you go. The flag's already waving.
Yeah.
So I started looking at what I was given and comparing it to what she was given, and rather than just get muddled in frustration over not being given clearly something I could analyze, because I couldn't analyze this uncertain data. But what I could do is I could start looking at proportions, and that's the numbers of the percentages in certain groups, and start comparing them. And that's where I started to compare, for example, the number of schools with big gains in the school performance scores, elementary versus the high school and combination schools. I did have enough to look at that. So in December, December was my first letter to John White and to Bessie, where I had looked at the scores and I said, you have an incredible number of high schools scoring major jumps in the school performance scores from one year to the next, and the elementary schools are not doing this, so you have bias in your scores. You have bias against the elementary schools in your scoring system. Well, he ignored that letter.
Okay.
He ignored it. And I wrote a second letter because there was some pressure put on him, and I will just let the details be on that, to where he got someone from the Department of Ed to write me back about questions I had, and about questions a colleague, Herb Bassett in LaSalle, was having as well, about the numbers and problems with the numbers. And so this individual at LDOE, Jennifer Baird, who is now gone. All of the folks who could do the numbers are gone from LDO. They are gone.
Yeah.
She wrote me back. Basically, it was a cover-up, and I addressed it. We've used these types of scores before, and there aren't any problems. It's like you're ignoring the problems with these scores. And so, sure enough, only recently, because he has to be cornered, John White. You have to corner John White to get anything resembling just a little trickle of truth out of him. And so he was cornered. And in the newspaper, yes, there's inflation in the school performance scores.
So he finally admitted it.
Well, not quite, because he's trying to exonerate himself. There were rules in Bessie that happened before I got there. Now, let's talk about John White and Bessie. John White has Bessie in his pocket, and John White can do what he wants, and Bessie will approve it, no matter how nonsensical it is. So first off, that doesn't fly, because it doesn't parallel his other behavior when he wants something out of Bessie, like a $1.2 million approval for Teach for America. He gets that. Secondly, I'm sorry, and I'm happy to be able to say this publicly, that man with two documented years of teaching experience, and I use the term loosely because he's not a teacher. He just happened to get in a classroom through a 5 to 6 week training program through TFA in New Jersey. He makes over $250,000 a year. To lead, now there's another word I'll use loosely, to lead education in Louisiana. So for over $250,000 a year, you don't get to say, I really couldn't do anything about this school performance score inflation situation. It's simply not true. But that's something he says. There's a lot of going on, but he has to be cornered even to get that far. So yes, there's inflation in the scores. Now what he hasn't addressed is the ramifications of that. There are schools being called failing, they're being penalized, and they're being taken over because of problems with calculation of scores. There are issues there. And there's monetary awards being given to schools who are supposedly excelling when we know, and he's admitted, there's inflation in the scores. Now here's something, this is just like the send it on home moment that I'm going to share here. There's inflation in the scores, and RSD still has scores in the toilet.
Well, that to me is amazing. And one of the things that I've stated on this program several times, and every opportunity I'm going to state it, one of the things that the reformers said, and not just the reformers in Louisiana, but for years nationally, what they have been saying is that if they got rid of the bad teachers, got rid of the teachers union, got rid of that teacher contract, turned it over to privatization, and put in the illusion of school choice, that would turn education around. And this is all pre-Katrina. This has been going on for years by different corporate reformers, and they have written it, and they don't have anything. That's has been their theory. In New Orleans, probably much more, I can safely say, than any city in the country, they have had that. For the last 7 years, they've had no teacher contract. They don't have the interference of the union. They have gotten rid of the quote-unquote traditional teachers, like you say. It's privatization, free market. They've had their realm. In addition to that, they have had an exorbitant amount of extra money, right? And a couple of years after Katrina, while other schools had a budget of $10, $9, sometimes $8,000 per child, this school district in New Orleans, with the Recovery School District, has had between $18,000 and $22,000 per child. With all of that, and with that whole theory that, Freeman and all of those people like that, and, the guy out in Seattle, Hill, and stuff like that, the scores are in the toilet. So if there's one thing that New Orleans proved, is that the corporate reforms don't work. If you just look at
Absolutely.
They just don't work, But getting back to, because you mentioned something about, this inflation of scores and schools being closed, and they're having problems in calculating those numbers. So, is it your belief that some of these schools are being closed, being given school performance scores that are wrong? And, well, we know that the high schools, he's admitted, even though he won't admit that it's his fault, they have scores that are inflated. So is this reform really unfair in terms of the closing and the monetary wars, particularly closing the schools?
Okay. You must understand that that's their goal, and they are achieving their goal.
Mm-hmm.
To get a district, to keep it in constant, what you can call churn, constant flux, confusion, and turnover. Let me say that I don't believe in school performance scores.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe in them because I don't think that they reflect really what goes on in a school. I think a lot of the good that goes on in these schools is not measurable. But the reformers insist that we must have data, that every decision is what they call data-driven. We have the numbers, and we're going to make the decisions. I have a degree in statistics, and it's not the numbers. It's how they're calculated and how they're used. And in the case of corporate reform, what is being withheld from the public. But the goal certainly is to promote a miracle. Now, it really doesn't matter what the truth is. We're going to promote the miracle. It's easy enough to do. I could promote a miracle among my own students. I teach over 100 students a year, and if I could do whatever I wanted to do with my students, one of the things I could do is I could group them. I could put the easier to handle students, the ones that are more talented, more gifted, better workers, all together. I could group those together, and I could focus on them, and I could say, look at what a fantastic job I'm doing. Look how well they score. And then I could take the other students, and I could either hide them, or if I revealed them, I could say, well, I'm still working on them. Oh, well, look how good you've done with this stellar group. Of course, you're still working on them. And I've done nothing. All I've done is regroup them. And the focus is on I keep thinking of the analogy of a kid who doesn't want to eat dinner and gives the illusion of eating dinner by scattering the food on the plate. That's really all that we have here, you know. It's all an illusion. You take situations like the magnet schools before Katrina, the magnets that were turned into selective admission charters after Katrina.
Yeah,
and you focus on them.
Which is an oxymoron.
I
Selective
tell you.
admission
Yes,
charters.
yes.
Charters,
Well,
by federal definition, are not supposed to be selective admission.
Right, but these get to be.
Oh, yeah. With Louisiana.
So, right. And so you take someone like John Merrow, who's going to come in and he's going to do a documentary on the rebirth of New Orleans after Katrina. I really want to do a parody and call it Afterbirth. You know, because there's nothing attractive or desirable about what's going on.
No.
You take someone like John Merrow, he comes in, he knows what's going on because Barbara Ferguson has told him, and she's documented that. Barbara Ferguson of Research on Reforms. And you look at schools like these selective admission charters. Oh, they're beautiful and they're marvelous, and you know, it's working here, it's working, and you ignore everything else, you know, all of the other schools with the low grades. Or you do like Leslie Jacobs, and you get on this very same radio station and you say, well, you know, it's incremental progress. No, it's not. Barbara Ferguson disproved that. She said we had incremental progress going on pre-Katrina in 51 schools that were taken over. So you don't get to say that. You don't get to come in and say, we're going to turn this place upside down and we're going to produce a miracle, and then focus on schools selectively, or say, oh, well, it's incremental progress, which is what they've done.
Yeah.
And let's talk the money, because part of what happened in 2003 with the establishment of recovery, now see, there's an interesting term, recovery, school district, is the argument that, Orleans Parish School Board, it's full of scandal, it's full of pocket lining, self-interest, and so we need to take this over. This is terrible. Well, you look at all the FEMA money that was squandered. You talk Alvarez and Marsal. Let's talk them, you know, the millions of dollars for doing nothing. And then Vallis, there's a story, having to bring in the National Guard to do what Alvarez and Marsal got paid for and got away with.
Yeah, and the security contract with
no one died. Is that the one you're talking about?
Well,
out of Texas?
The security firm out of Texas.
Yes. They took the money.
$30 million to do 28 schools.
Yes, but that was what they said. Well, we were successful because no one died.
That's right. You're absolutely right.
That's right. That's what they said.
And you've got to couple that with pre-Katrina, when we had 123 schools. Pre-Katrina, nobody died, and we had a budget of less than $10 million.
Well, but you can't look at that. Don't look behind that curtain. You know, just don't go there.
There's no curtain number 3.
I'm telling you, the squandering of the FEMA money and the billions rolling in. You know, that is left unaddressed. So, absolutely. Now, I want to make clear to the folks listening, the parents and the students and the teachers in New Orleans, and when I say New Orleans, I mean RSD and Orleans Parish School Board. I do not think that the school performance scores and calling the district failing reflects on them. I don't think that. What I do think is that it reflects on the state and the likes of John White and those who want to go around the country saying what a miracle it is, because they set up this system. They set up this letter grade system, which comes straight out of Florida, straight from Jeb Bush, and is promoted by ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council. And in their documents, they said the letter grades are the linchpin. The letter grades hold everything together. Why? Because they need to panic the public with a low letter grade.
And basically that is more or less to qualify you. So if I give you the letter grades and keep this churning, like you say, this disaster, we've got to do something, then I could come in and just screw you around.
Absolutely. And let's qualify what you just said. What I can do if I'm John White and if I'm other reformers even around the country is I can constantly bring in corporations to make their money and move out. They come in. In the case of charters, it was just a charter audit where the charters are grossly underregulated. And John White, in his response to that, was like, well, you know, we're okay with that, basically.
Yeah,
You know,
it's okay to be.
so what that does is it allows the companies to come in, and for 3 years, Chaz Romer, we have really regulated the charters. Why? Because if they don't work in 3 years, they're out. Well, for 3 years, they get to really haul in, rake in some cash, and even then, they're not necessarily
what
out.
can happen to a child? You're a teacher. I'm a former teacher. What can happen to a group of fourth graders, a group of third graders in 3 years that you're constantly teaching, and you're not monitoring them? What can happen to 300 kids? 3 years is a long time in a child's educational career. That can be very, very damaging.
Oh, yes, sir. Absolutely. And then you have to think of the long term as well. What's going to happen when this corporate reform educated, there's another loosely used term, gets out and are adults trying to function in the world, and they've had this sloppy, slap together non-education. We haven't felt this the way that we're going to, but I even hate to use the term for the children. It's for the children, because that's a reformer term that, they're saying that, and then they still sleep at night knowing what they're doing to the children. It's not for the children, it's to the children that they're doing this, and to the teachers and to the communities. But it certainly enables them to make a lot of money.
A lot of money. Let's do a little housekeeping. We're going to come back and talk a little bit about new schools for New Orleans.
Can we talk about TFA
a
little bit? Because I really would like to say something about TFA.
Choice, which is another
I tell you. Yeah.
You're listening to Dr. Mercedes Schneider, a statistician and researcher, and also a teacher from St. Tammany Parish. And she has a blog, which she'll announce at the end of this program, which I think you need to read. And if you wish to call in and make a comment, you can call in at 504-260-9265. That's 504-260-9265. We'll be talking with her about a number of issues relative to the reforms that we've had in Louisiana that have been bulldozed here in Louisiana post-Katrina. So if you wish to call, you can call in at 504-260-9265. And if you're transitioning to a computer, you can speak with us at www.wbok. You can listen to us, at WBOK1230am.com. That's WBOK1230am.com. And we have our first caller, Joe. Let's take him right quick. Good morning, Joe. Welcome to the New Orleans Imperative.
Good morning. How you doing?
How you doing, Mr. Ricasner?
Yes, it is.
How you do, brother?
I'm doing fine, enjoying the show, and of course your guest is most knowledgeable, and I truly mean that. I enjoy the comments, commentary, and the work that both of you do.
Thank you.
But let me just say this right quick. I agree with the guest 1,000%. Very insightful. But I'm going to take it another step further. I know Teach for America ain't about nothing. That Bessie Board ain't about nothing. John White ain't about nothing. They just doing the corporate bidding as such and settling their own net. But watch this. That federal money going to run out, which going to be the demise of the RSD control. It's a good thing the rural areas are beginning to see by watching what's happening in New Orleans close up, that they don't want that to come to their areas. That's a good thing. I can remember in 2005, I was working on my master's in Southern and Baton Rouge, and the whole discussion right after the storm was about what was going on in New Orleans. And I watched my colleagues from the rural areas looking in amazement and couldn't believe what's happening and never thought it would come their way. But the last thing I left them with, if you don't think you need to join this fight now in 2005, just keep on sitting on the sideline, and soon you'll see a RSD coming to your community real soon. Now, that being played out, the next grounds for this fight for New Orleans is at the Orleans Parish School Board. They know eventually they got to get them schools up. And those powers that be, Leslie Jacobs and her crew, is working hard to control that Orleans Parish School Board so that they can continue the work that they did when it was under the control of RSD. So we got to be very mindful of the dialogue that's going on now. Stop looking at personalities and start looking at qualifications and what's best for our children. The children I'm talking about is them 4th graders and them 8th graders. You failing year after year, putting them 2 years behind at a grade level. So by the time they reach 8th grade, they're too old to continue to pursue that line of study that they were on, and there are very few alternatives out there. And this is happening now with our children. RSD is a joke. Scholarship money, grant money that's available to charters. They're stacking the deck, giving it to who they won't give it to. Kids get bunches, millions of dollars a charter. Front line getting millions of dollars a charter. And those schools that are actually doing the work can't get nothing out the deal. You know what they get? Oh, now you got to start paying for the water. Don't flush the toilet, but one time a day per student. You think that ain't madness? I'll keep listening to what y'all do.
Well, look, Joe, always good to hear from you, and thank you for your comments, okay?
Keep up the good work, Doc. Love y'all.
Okay, same here.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. We're going to take Tracy on line 1. Good morning, Tracy. Welcome to the New Orleans Imperative.
Hey, good morning. Good morning. How y'all doing there? Good morning.
I'm okay.
Yes, sir. I had a question.
Sure.
I think I know the answer. I'm just not certain.
Sure.
With charter schools, are they not held accountable or responsible to their respective sponsors or business, I guess, groups or interest groups or whatever? Is that not the case with charter schools?
Charters get to answer to themselves, for themselves. They get to set their own rules. Wow. And according to the latest audit, now the audit can't come in and enforce anything. What the auditor did is he notified the House of Representatives and the Senate in Louisiana of the condition of things. But basically, charters are a free-for-all. I mean,
I knew they weren't accountable to any type of board or state entity. Am I correct in saying that?
Well, they're supposed to be, but John White has excused their being accountable. Right. And let me tell you also, Tracy, one thing that he said in that audit, one thing that showed up, rather, is when John White and the Louisiana Department of Education would fail to follow through with what was supposed to be in the law, Bessie would come and retroactively change the law. They did that in a couple places, where, for example, the charter students were supposed to, at several schools, have a pretest. And that pretest didn't happen for almost 2 years.
Right.
Okay? And so then Bessie changed the rules. So that's how it works.
Yeah, and I think, that you're clarifying. I could very well hear that, Tracy, but it is basically an unregulated system.
Right.
And
go ahead. I'm sorry.
And the problem with that is that, as Dr. Schneider has said earlier, it appears as if the move for education in Louisiana is just like what they're doing with other arenas in this country. Give it to the private sector. Don't regulate them at all, and they're not held accountable for anything. And that's on point.
Correct, and it appears that way, like you said, and the reason, because I have a special needs son in a charter school right now. It was in RSD. I will say, and I'll say the school, it's Craig over there by the Harry Jackson Theater, by the old municipal auditorium there. And let me see, what year is it? 2013. So 2011, 2012, it was the last year it was RSD.
Yeah.
And my son received his assistance and so forth in the school. Actually, that's the reason he went there, because his mother and I, we had tried to enroll him into several charter schools before, and we realized, the problems and the issues with that. Well, now it's become a charter school, 2012, 2013 school year, and his IEP, and I forget what the acronym stands for.
Individualized Education Plan.
Correct, 100%. And that wasn't done until I think it was like April or May or something. It was way in the latter part of the school year. And his mother and I, we raised all kind of cane about it, of course. And we thought, we had the similar issues with the RSD when we first enrolled him in school. This was 2009. But we had resolved that issue. But now, it appears, like you said, with charter schools, and because we were trying to find someone that they would be held accountable to. We could not. And we thought that was an issue, of course.
Yeah,
and that, I think that's something that a lot of us as the populace, we need to understand that charter schools, like you're saying, they are not held accountable to anyone. And they basically, like you said, they have free reign. The teachers, from what I've seen, I mean, you can have a degree in anything and go and teach. I have qualifications, and no one can tell me that.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's really. But look, Tracy, I got to run. I got the phone beeping. But I think you're a first time caller, and I want to thank you for calling in. And please call back again, okay?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank y'all. Y'all take care.
Okay, all right.
Ray, can I make a quick comment?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. For those listening who might not understand what the IEP is, the Individualized Education Plan, that is something that's supposed to be put in place at the beginning of a school year, and it's supposed to direct a student's learning. And so for Tracy to have that not happen until the end of the school year.
It's problematic.
Very problematic. Just
because what happened during that year? Because that's what the teacher's supposed to follow.
Who knows?
Yeah. We're going to take Luella Givens, former Bessie member. Good morning, Luella. Welcome again.
Well, good morning, guys. I just probably need to take up residence over at WBOK whenever you all are talking about education. And Dr. Schneider, I have to tell you that I try real hard to sit down and be quiet and listen to the discussion, because I don't want people to say, well, she just thinks she knows everything about everything. But I happen to have known a lot about the last 8 years of education in Louisiana, having lived through this nightmare. A couple of comments. First of all, you are so on point that it's a welcome voice and welcome to our group.
Thank you.
Secondly of all, the parent that just called may have been the victim of an administration change. And as much as we would like to think all people do the same thing when they leave a school, some people take records with them when they go.
Could very well happen.
And so his child's records may very well have disappeared from that building.
Yep.
And Raynard, you've taken over buildings, and you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah.
So I think he needs to have a conversation with the earlier caller, Mr. Ricasma, and let that be his reference point. Sit down with Mr. Ricasma to get an understanding of where his child's IEP was when they took over that school. As to the discussion about charter schools and accountability, if you go back to 2003, Raynard, and maybe we need to do some of these old programs over and over again so that people can remember the discussion we've had for the last 7 years. In the beginning, when we called for accountability from charter schools, we were told that we were discouraging participation by the general public because nobody would serve on a charter school board if they knew that we were going to be looking over their shoulder at their financial management.
I don't mean to cut you off, but I just need to interject this right now. Here we have contractors, and charter schools to me are contractors.
Exactly.
So here we have the lobbyists, and this sounds like something comes from the Louisiana Charter School Association saying,
before they were formed.
Don't put it in the regulations because the contractors are not going to want to service them.
That's right.
Well, to me, if you are the contractor, you do what I say do.
Well, not only that, if you want to be a public servant, and this is
that word seems to be missing. Servant, public servant.
Go ahead.
That's right. And so they said to me, in particular, that you don't want people to serve on these charter boards if A, you look at their finances, and B, if you look at the finances of the school. So there was no mechanism ever put in place where a charter school had to come before the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education and bring a budget. Never.
You know that's quite interesting because there's one charter school board member who says that, and they got on the board after the school year started, and there is no budget. That school operated this past year with no budget. And I don't want to name that, but with no budget. So when, and this goes back to Tracy's call, when we talk about unregulated.
Constant churn.
It's free fall. Now some though, there are some, because, they're favorite children. And those are unregulated.
Yeah.
And the other ones are overregulated.
Well, it depends on who you are.
It depends on who you are.
There it is.
The other thing, as to this school, the DVD charter school.
DVD.
The disc, the DVD, putting the discs on.
Oh,
you talked about the Ruston New Living Word. That's the voucher school.
Yeah, New Living Word. Yeah, we're going to talk about that next Monday, but yeah, that's
that John White is now saying overbilled the state by $675,000.
Oh, it's grown. It's grown since last week.
Yeah, last I heard it was like 300 and something thousand.
God.
Yes, the article I read last night said 6. But let me say this to you about them. When their budget was presented before they got the charter, and I may get my DVD schools mixed up. But
well, they got a bunch of them, but go ahead.
They got a bunch of them. The DVD schools charter said that we only need, I believe, about $6,000 per child per year. One of the Bessie board members said, oh, no, we're going to fund them just like we fund everybody else.
It's very generous of Betsy.
And my argument was, these people say they don't need $8,000.
And you're going to give them more money.
$6,000.
Boy, they,
okay?
Go ahead.
And so they were funded at that level. And now I believe that the auditor has caught up with the books.
Yeah.
They're being thrown under the bus and saying, you overbilled us. I don't believe they overbilled. I believe they billed what they were told they could bill.
And the sad thing about that school,
really
and we're going to talk about that, that's next Monday's topic, but, the sad thing about that is that of all the criticisms of the voucher program when it was being presented, and as you well know, Dr. Schneider, the first school that they mentioned saying, why are you giving this school students? And it was the New Living Word School.
Yeah,
that was the first school.
Former owner had felony charges against her during the last summer, and that came out. That came out in Monroe, I believe. And one of my friends, who's a teacher in Calcasieu, actually went and pulled the documents on that issue. And then they said, "Oh, well, she's not running the school now."
See, there were no background checks that I know of anybody who applied for a charge.
Free government money.
Right.
And
so these people, what's the name of the group that came out of California that was given a license to open 7 charter schools?
I feel like a quiz
show.
show.
Never done any work in the state of Louisiana.
I can't remember who that is.
Sure, but I always think about flying horses.
Oh, fins? You're not talking about fins?
No, it's not fins, but it's something equally frivolous. But,
okay.
But anyway, I just wanted to tell you that thank you so much. I'm listening, and Raynard, we really just need to go back because we've covered so much territory.
There's so much to cover at Peyton
I
Place.
think we may have been early in some of the technicalities that we've been talking about.
Yeah.
Because it just what we said sounded so far-fetched that I don't think people believed it, but now that they've lived it for 4 or 5 years, they're starting to understand what we were warning about because of the lack of oversight in the proposals. Now, all of these plans for oversight were supposed to have been developed and were approved by Bessie before they were developed. And so what has happened is there aren't any.
Yeah.
So there is no plan for oversight.
Wow. Yes, really, really something. We've got to get you on here, Lou, and we've got to dig into this a little bit more. And you have this institutional history that we cannot ignore. So I'll definitely be talking with you because we're going to be hitting some of these hot topics before school starts. And want to always, again, thank you for calling.
All right. Take care, and you continue the good work.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. We're going to take Brother Darrell. How you doing, Darrell?
Well, good morning, Dr. Sanders.
Good morning.
Guess what? It took some work, but I found the mission statement for RSD school.
You found a mission statement?
I found the mission statement.
Well, can you read it to us right quick, please?
Yes, sir. It says, fearing that black literacy would prove a threat to the slave system, which relied on slaves' dependence on masters, whites in many colonies instituted laws forbidding slaves to learn to read or write and making it a crime for others to teach them.
That's the mission.
So in order to impose these laws, RSD brings in a lot of Teach for America teachers, employees.
So white upper class folks.
These operators to pay them and to make sure of, if anything, above all, that no one is learning. That's the system we are dealing with here in New Orleans, whether they're special needs students, whether they're, that's why we have no community schools, there's no oversight, and the way they're closing schools here in New Orleans, our parents have no options.
You're right.
And the only option is really to take, look, this is me, to take off 5 months, like whether it's the fall semester or the spring semester, and just boycott. And demand community schools and demand that these teachers, Teach for America, leave this city. That's the only way we're going to stop this system. Otherwise, all these people need Dr. Sanders, when by people, I mean these operators of the charter schools, they just need a banner.
They
can stick that banner on any building or trailer and call it a school.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about Teach for America in a minute. But, what you read, I've heard that before. I've heard that description before. But when you look at the results, and, as Dr. Schneider has said it, 7 years in the schools in the Terrell, and they're saying it's fine. I think it collaborates exactly with what you're saying.
Exactly, Dr. Sanders. They found a way not to teach our kids, and then they found a system of broken families, of parents who are not engaged in their children's education. That's why they're so successful with their devious acts.
Yeah, well, look, I got
do this in a society where parents are engaged with their kids, and the parents know their rights and everything else. But since they know, there's a population here where the parents put their kids on a bus 5 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
And receive them at 7 o'clock at night.
Yeah, Daryl, I got to run. I got another call,
you,
and we got some topics. Thanks again for calling. We're going to take Brother Mims right quick. Good morning, Brother Mims.
Good morning. I just want to say Leslie Jacobs, Ernest Jones, Doughboy, and John White. Let me tell you something. We need to think seriously about keeping our kids home. Our kids are gold mines, and the brother just got off the phone. He was telling the truth. We need to teach America, need to leave America, leave our children alone. And we got parents who are not, who care and think that what those people say is right. Our children are the next thing next to homicide is the school system that these charter schools, they are killing our children spiritually and emotionally. So I'm going to get off the phone. I'm going to say we need to think about seriously keeping our children at home, because without our children, they can't get no money.
Yeah.
Does it make sense?
Makes sense. All right, Brother Mims.
I love you much. You have a blessed day.
Same here. Take it easy. So let's get back to a few topics, then we'll take a few callers later. Let's talk about Teach for America.
I would really like to talk about Teach for America.
Let's go
okay.
for it.
I'd like to talk about what I'm not sure the public knows about Teach for America.
Well, let's go.
Teach for America was formed by a woman, Wendy Kopp, in 1991. She was out of Princeton. She's not an educator. She graduated in business. And has decided to impose a business model on education. Now, when Teach for America began, the idea that she put forth was, okay, we will take promising young graduates from around the country, train them, and put them in areas that are in need of teachers for a short time, a teacher temp agency, if you will, in needy areas, which, if there are needy areas, that sounds good. What it has evolved into, by 2001, the mission had changed. We need to take this promising talent, these people who decided not to major in education. They really don't want to be in education. They don't want to be classroom teachers. But we need to groom them and replace the administration in public education with these people. That's what I don't think a lot of people realize is really
how it has changed.
Well, that is the end goal.
Yeah,
and that's why we have John White, because John White was a Teach for America alum. He did his 2 years. He had his few weeks of training. And then Eli Broad, I'm not sure if people know that name, as in the Broad Foundation. On paper, it looks like Broad. Has this idea that he's propagated, and he's joined with Teach for America as far as taking these people from outside of education who want to privatize education and supplanting those who normally come up in the ranks in education who have teaching careers decades long, and then they go into administration. The word out of Broad and TFA is, these people who normally come up the ranks, they really don't know what they're doing because they're not administrators. They really should just stay in the classroom. You need us to come in and run the show because we know how to run shows. Okay, so that is the piece of Teach for America. I'm not sure that people realize that is the goal. And so John White at the Louisiana Department of Education, he's brought in a number of these folks who know nothing about running a Department of Education, but they're there drawing the salaries.
Yeah, and you're right on point. And, about 24 years ago, I was a principal. And right shortly after I became a principal, Teach for America entered New Orleans with that particular original mission, to teach in areas where there were shortages. And at that time, ironically, we had a shortage of certified teachers. And I don't know who exactly made that decision. So I had about 5 or 6 of them. And that was the initial move. But it has since changed.
Yes.
And it has basically gone into a direction where we are going to create the teachers now. And I think Ms. Lottie Beebe from the Bessie Board clearly documented in a letter last week to the editor the monies that we are paying for these maybe teacher interns at best, in the fact that we pay their salary, then we pay a contract to Teach for America, right?
About $3,000 a teacher. It's like a temp agency fee.
Yeah, and you pay, and then we pay a contract to them, and then they have another contract that each school district pays them. Then the state pays them. Right?
Oh, they're making it hand over fist.
Well, they have basically accumulated, I think, about $500 million. Teach for America, and everybody donates to them. Every major foundation donates to them. So my question is that what are you donating to them for? We pay them. Let's take, for instance, if they were really doing a great job, right? Why should I pay you on top of a salary? I don't understand that.
The foundations, there was a manifesto written and published in the early 2000s, I think it was, by Eli Broad and by others that basically says we need to forget all of this experience and credentialing, and we need to bring in this talent from other areas with no teaching experience and credentialing. It doesn't matter. We need to bring them in to revolutionize education. That's what the foundations are paying for, and they know full well that that's what they're paying for. The way to accomplish that is you have to supplant the teaching force. You have to get rid of the traditional teacher. You have to badmouth them. You have to make the public believe they're failing. Absolutely.
And blame everything on the teacher.
Absolutely.
Everything is, if anything that is wrong with public education in their mind, it's that teacher.
You got to have a scapegoat.
Teacher.
It is the teacher.
It is
now, Teach for America and privatization in general operates only on ideology.
Oh, yeah,
there's no proof.
No
it's
proof.
Just it will work because I say it will, and I believe it will, and therefore I'm going to shape any evidence to show that it works, and that's why RSD is where it is.
Well, and early this morning, I think it was, I was on the internet, and there was a tragedy that happened with a plane that crashed in San Francisco.
Yes.
Miraculously, only 2 people so far have died, right? And so in the early parts of the investigation, and I forgot the federal agency that, that investigates, plane crashes across the country. And this plane was coming from Korea, I think. They stated that the pilot had only had 43 hours of flying experience and that he was landing too slow. He was coming in too slow. And they think that that was the cause of it, right? So, after I read the article, I said, now, here we have a guy with 43 hours. Why we can't hold the same standards to teaching? You want somebody to teach your child with 3 weeks of training and to teach them calculus, and they have a arts degree.
You know, and I think a lot of people don't
yeah.
realize that's what they get for Teach for America, because what Teach for America promotes is if you're smart, you don't need to really be trained in teaching. You can just teach.
But why is experience a premium in other professions and not in this profession? All of a sudden.
Right. Well, let me make a bigger jump. Why is experience a premium for these folks who are giving money to Teach for America? Why don't they send their kids to schools that are staffed by Teach for America?
Oh, no.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, the mayor of Chicago walked out of an interview when the interviewer asked him, well, why your child doesn't go to these schools? I mean, he got heartlessly mad and came back and put his finger in her face. I mean, this is crazy. We're going to take a caller right quick. We're going to take Greg right quick for a quick question. Good morning, Greg. Welcome to New Orleans Imperative.
Hey, good morning. I'm wondering, it seems like it's all about money. The bottom line is money, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, yeah.
And right now it seems like it's a real drastic way they're trying to get your money. So if people stop sending their kids to school,
yeah,
I mean, just stop sending them to school, there's no money that's going to be gotten to these charter schools or whatever school, right?
Yeah.
Well, how long can they survive without one child being in school before they try to find out what parents and what society want to be done for our kids?
You have to be careful assuming that this will end if the children aren't in school, because they will still say your child could be in school and they'll give them the money. They'll still put them on the roll.
We're getting a short deal regardless of whether they're in school or not. It's just the money is what they're getting and what they seem to be wanting. They're not giving the kids a quality education, so it don't matter how long they're out of school. It's the fact that the money needs to stop until we get what we want. And all parents need to stop bringing their kids to school until this happens. And eventually it's going to happen because they want the money. Bottom line.
Yeah. Okay, then. Thank you, Greg. Thanks for your comment. Right. I got to move on. Thanks again for calling. Right. We're going to take Richard right quick. Good morning, Richard. How you doing?
Yeah, good morning to you. Look, briefly, that Landry Walker situation
where
they lauded perception was that Landry was a failing school, Walker was a school that was passing.
Yeah.
And those kids who were placed over at Landry was 2 and 3 grade levels behind. And all that was on purpose to be able to do what they are trying to do in terms of merging those two schools.
Yeah.
And I would like to get in touch with those parents whose kids are presently enrolled at L.B. Landry, and those youngsters should remain at L.B. Landry, and whoever else to send to see just how great the academic program was or is at.
Do you have a contact number, Richard, you want to give for those parents who can call or anything? Because I don't mind.
They can call me on my personal phone at 504-875-5002. And I would like to get with those parents and make sure that those youngsters who are presently at L.B. Landry remain at L.B. Landry.
Okay, then. We'll definitely do that. Why don't you give that number again, Rich?
504-875-5002. Because we can't continue to sit back and let these people do what they want to do. And this whole thing is about money.
Okay, good enough. Thanks. Thank you much, Rich. Thanks again. I want to talk about another pending, I believe this is another pending nightmare, because all this stuff is blowing up in their face. Course choice.
Yes, sir.
Could you tell our audience about that? Because it's the new disaster.
All is choice. We have all this choice, you know. Course choice is headed up by David Lefty Lefkowitz. Now, you see, you want someone in charge of your money whose nickname is Lefty. That's that right there. Who was hired by John White, and there were some emails released between White and Kunjan Narachania. I don't know if I'm saying her name right. Okay. She's another TFA hire at LDOE. She's a chief of staff, I believe.
Okay.
Where they said, we need to figure out something to do with David. Now, they had hired him for $145,000, and they didn't know what to do with him. So he's formerly with Enron. He was trying to sell water plots. Wow. Out in the ocean. Anyway, okay. Yeah. Okay. So they hired him, and they said, let's put him in charge of course choice. And so there's the encouragement of who's leading this an afterthought that we were already paying $145,000 to. Course choice recently got into some trouble because of fast path learning, particularly, was enrolling children and promising them technology, laptop devices and that sort of thing. They weren't talking to parents. They weren't going through the schools. They were simply going around and enrolling kids. And it was a real fiasco because, say, an elementary child could be enrolled in a high school course, or a high school child could be enrolled in a course that he or she already passed. It was a mess. And it came out, some of the representatives, I believe, realized that this was happening in their neighborhoods. Really, for one of the groups, it was on Craigslist. Hey, you want to make some money? Come enroll kids in course choice. And so that blew up recently. That coupled with the fact that John White was really dependent, and Bobby Jindal, dependent on getting at the minimum foundation program money to pay for course choice. And the Louisiana Supreme Court said, no, that money is earmarked for public schools, and so you can't have it. So course choice, between the revelation that FastPath, who's chairman of the board, by the way, is former U.S. Secretary of Education Rod Page, who had already been in financial trouble for some of the decisions he made there. FastPath learning was brought to the attention of the public. Now, what I found interesting when they were brought to the attention, John White didn't say that their contract was canceled, just that they were going to be limited or something to that effect, or watch more closely. Those are not his exact words, but he didn't cut them off right away. He just said, and there were spokespeople for the other companies, we're verifying, we're making sure that those students enrolled are enrolled in proper courses. But here's the thing about course choice. It is the biggest money maker of all. For one thing, there's no building. The children don't have to show up anywhere. And the course choice enrollees could get $700 up front for enrolling each child, and it's up to the course choice provider to say, oh yeah, this kid really took this course and completed it. So I want to make some fast money. I enroll your kid. You don't know I've enrolled your kid. I report back to the state, yeah, this kid took this course, and the state gives me money. Unregulated money.
Free government money.
Free money.
Free money.
And so that issue blew up. Now, course choice, John White had to reduce it to only $2 million. That's the latest I heard, by getting money from other areas of the budget. But each provider can enroll 250 students per $1 million. And the last I heard with FastPath is that no one was enrolled because they had been found in public with their pants down, so to speak, an embarrassing situation. Look like they just sit down and try to figure out schemes to get absolutely.
money out of the education pot and put it in the private sector.
Absolutely.
Whatever scheme that comes up.
And no regulation. We really have to not regulate them, because we know business will go just fine without regulation.
And they can do it better.
Absolutely.
They can do it better. We're going to take Janice for a quick question. This is our last caller. Good morning, Janice. Welcome to the New Orleans Imperative. Good morning.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Thank you for taking my call.
No problem.
I'm not in education, but I listen to WBOK around the clock. And based on what I've heard, if the children start the school year, the money is funded to the people who are just taking the money. So will it accomplish anything by not sending your children to the school other than at the beginning of the school year? Because if they're going to get the money regardless, they don't care if they don't show up. I mean, am I confused in that?
There are 2 times during the year that counts are taken. It's in October and in February, and funding is supposed to be determined by those counts. Now, Janice, I know parents are saying, I'm just not going to send my kid, and that's how I'm going to fight this. But I really want the public to understand that these folks are playing with the public, and they will, and they probably already have figured out ways to say your child should have attended, and so we're paying the money regardless of what you do. And that's not to discourage people from action. That's just to make the public aware of how they work, how the privatizers work. They are going to go after that money. What we really need is a few good indictments. And so putting the pressure on from above by contacting the auditor's office, contacting your representatives and senators. What I find recently is that the House of Representatives has lost that honeymoon luster with privatization more than the Senate. But even those who are still trying to play the game, they'll reach a point where it's every man for himself. And if they think they're going to go down for supporting the likes of this nonsense, then they may speak up. So to be in touch with the representatives and the senators, I think that is a fantastic way to go.
Okay. Thank you much, Janice. Thanks for calling.
Thank you so much.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that what we have, and you've been following this very, very well, Dr. Schneider, is that, for the last year or so, all of the stuff that was rammed through is being defeated in the courts. We have a legislature that is basically becoming have very cold feet about privatization. And, it's time for people to wake up and to begin whatever your course of action is going to be. It's to begin doing something to, basically turn this school district back into a public education school district and taking us off its path. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, look, I want to thank you for coming.
Can I tell them my blog?
Sure. Go ahead.
Okay,
yeah, please do. Please do.
I do write extensively on the issues I've discussed and more. I have a blog. I'm going to spell it out. Yeah. Deutsch29.wordpress.com. DEUTSCH29. But if you want to find me online, you can simply Google my name, which is Mercedes, spelled like Mercedes, Schneider, SCHNEIDER, and you will find my blog entries that way.
Yes, and it's a very, very good blog, and I'd like to encourage you all to read it. I read it daily myself. I want to thank you again for coming in.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
This program will rebroadcast on the NewOrleansImperative.org, the NewOrleansImperative.org. That's one word. We would like to thank everyone for listening. Next week, we're going to be talking about the voucher program, this troubled voucher program, failed voucher program. Matter of fact, it was failed before it was rammed through the legislature. It failed in New Orleans, but failure doesn't matter. Just keep pushing.
Keep giving the money away.
Just keep giving the money away. We'd like to thank our sponsors, Metro and Richards Disposal, New Orleans Educational Equity Roundtable, the Fallbrook St. Rock Improvement Association, and the Wisdom Reception Center. As I stated earlier, this program will rebroadcast on the NewOrleansImperative.org for you to listen to at your leisure. You can also make any donations on that website, 50 cents or $1, to help keep this program going on that website, the NewOrleansImperative.org. Thank you for listening to the New Orleans Imperative. You all have a great week. Please stay tuned for Talk What You Know with Drs. Littletons and Dr. Johns, Reverend Drs. Littletons and Johns. Thanks again for listening to the New Orleans Imperative.